Alright guys, so in this video we're actually going to take a look at another EverDrive cartridge made by Krikzz, this time for the Nintendo 64. This is Steve from Restalgia, and let's get started. Alright guys, so welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, please consider going down below the video and subscribing. It would be greatly appreciated. And before we get started, I also want to mention I am now officially selling some merch. I've got a bunch of cool designs. A lot of them are takes on how hairy my arms are. And if you guys are interested in supporting the channel, this is a great way for you to get some merch and also help to support me while I continue to grow the channel. So take a peek down below the description. You'll be able to see a bunch of those things, and if you like them, pick something up. Now let's go ahead and get started with this review. This device was sent to me by Krikzz for review, just like the Super Nintendo FX Pack Pro that was sent out to me a few weeks ago. This one was one that I'm actually particularly excited for. Because of my age, N64 really hits home for me. It was one of the consoles that I grew up with in my late childhood and early teen years, and it's just got a special place in my heart. And another reason that I'm actually pretty excited for this is because it should come as no surprise to many that N64 emulation is far from perfect, and certainly you can do it on a decent computer and you can get pretty good compatibility, but nothing quite beats the experience of playing on the original console. Now, just like with all the other EverDrive products, when you get this thing out of the box, it's just essentially the EverDrive by itself, and there's nothing else that comes inside the box. It's just very simple. Now, the design specifically here is that I got a transparent blue shell, and when I was chatting with the gentleman who sent this over to me, he gave me a few different options. So these are fairly customizable. You can get it in red, you can get it in gray, you can get it in a whole bunch of other colors. So keep in mind that if you are interested in picking it up, you actually are able to kind of customize these to your personal taste. Now, while I'm getting this thing disassembled, I am going to tell you guys a little bit more about it. Now, this specific version that I have is the EverDrive 64X7, which is the latest version available for the N64. And with that, you're going to get a few different features that are going to be different than previous iterations, but the main features that are going to be here is that it does support PAL and NTSC systems. You can pop this into whatever region console you have, and it will run. Additionally, with that, it has an UltraCIC III with region auto detection. So even if you have a North American console, you'll have no problem at all loading either Japanese or PAL region ROMs. It'll auto detect it and it will allow it to run. Another feature here is that we have a real-time clock that's built into this thing, so any games that do require that are fully compatible. Now, this also has SD and SDHC cards that are supported. Now, I should mention it is a micro SD card that is now running on all of these newer devices. It's a little bit more efficient, and honestly, I think at this point you can buy a micro SD card for cheaper than you can buy an SD card anyway. In terms of loading times, it's actually really quick. It's got a 23 megabyte per second loading speed, which is really good, especially considering the size of most N64 ROMs or even any of the homebrew ROMs. You're not going to be running into any problems with data transfer speeds there. Now, another really cool feature that this device has, and they've done this with a few of the other devices as well, but it actually supports NES games, and it has a built-in emulator. Now, that being said, not all the games are running perfectly. The emulator itself does have some problems, but it is kind of cool that you can throw a ton of Nintendo games on here and N64 games, and you can play them both on the N64 hardware. Now, the other real main feature here is going to be that it does have internal Gamepak save support, so you don't actually need to have a Gamepak plugged into your controller. You can actually save directly to the cartridge, and it'll create a save file on the SD card, and you're pretty much good to go running directly off of that. So that's pretty convenient. You don't ever really have to worry about running out of space unless your SD card is running out of space. The last few things here, you can throw on GameShark cheats. It does have IPS and APS patches that are available for it, so you're pretty much good in terms of anything that you really want to run on this thing, and compatibility is actually pretty darn good too. Now, there is a USB port on it. Now, that's specifically for developer use. It's not really something the end user is going to mess around with, but if that is something you're interested in and you do have some background knowledge on how to develop for these sort of things, you can absolutely do that because you've got access. Now, when you compare this version to the EverDrive 64 version 2.5, for example, one, it's got a dedicated save memory, which I did just mention. It saves without reset, the real-time clock feature, and the USB port for developers. Those are going to be the big differences. Now, I've also read that there's some compatibility with certain games on the older versions. For example, Pokemon Stadium 2 was not running in some of the older versions of the EverDrive 64. Now, I've never owned an EverDrive 64, so I don't have one physically that I can compare it to, but what I can tell you is that the new version does seem to have substantially better compatibility, and based off of everything I've read online, there are very few titles that are not running, and yes, Pokemon Stadium 2 does appear to be running properly. Now, getting this thing up and running, you can't just take this thing out of the box and pop it into the console, turn it on, and expect it to work. It just won't. What you are going to need to do is hop onto your computer. You're going to need to download the operating system for the EverDrive cart, and it's really simple. You just hop on over to everdrivestore.com, you click on the product, and when you go down below the features list, you're going to be given a couple of options in terms of the update software. Now, obviously, we want to grab the correct version, so make sure that you're getting the EverDrive 64X7 version. Once you click on it, it will take you to a download page. You want to download the latest version. Whatever version is the farthest down on the list is what you want. You're going to click on that. It'll download a zip file. You will extract that zip file on your desktop, and then you just dump it directly onto the root of a micro SD card. And it's really that simple. There's not much else that you need to do other than load up your Nintendo games if you want to use those, and your N64 games. But overall, I'm actually really impressed with the build quality on these things. The cartridge feels incredibly solid. It's really cool that you can kind of customize it and choose whatever color you want, and it just looks really good. This is one of those all-in-one solutions. If you grab one of these, you load up whatever backups you have of your games, you throw them on there, and you pretty much just leave this thing sitting in the N64. There's not really a reason to take it out because you can play whatever you want right off of this cartridge. Now, the actual menu navigation is relatively simple. You do have a little bit of graphical artwork going on in the background, but it's a very simple point and click type of menu. You just go ahead and select the feature or the folder that you're interested in. In this case, we're going to jump into Nintendo 64 games, and then you'll see all of the games will be listed. You navigate through the list with the D-pad. You can either quick navigate by using the left and right arrows, or you can go ahead and select line by line using the up-down keys, and that's pretty much it. Once you select the game you want, you press A to launch it, and then the cartridge is actually going to take that ROM, temporarily flash it to the cartridge, the console resets, and then the console loads the cartridge as if it's the original game. So you pretty much get a one-to-one experience in terms of compatibility as well as playability. Now, as I said, I didn't have any of the previous versions of the EverDrive to really test and compare, but I will go through a bunch of games and I'll throw some of them up on screen so you guys can see in terms of functionality, controls, input lag, everything. Honestly, it really feels like you're just playing the original game, which is exactly how it was designed. It is a very well thought out and put together product, and really EverDrive is the leader in the market when it comes to making these all-in-one cart solutions, and it's highly recommended that if you're in the market for these, you try to avoid the Chinese knockoffs and you go for the real deal. You'll just be happier at the end of the day with the quality that you get out of the product. Now, as I said, I was going to throw a few different games up on screen for you to check out. The big one here that I've heard a lot of people talking about in terms of compatibility is Pokemon Stadium 2. So I am going to throw that up on screen here, and you're going to be able to see that everything is more or less running exactly how it should. You would expect if there was any sort of graphical errors or any sort of compatibility, we're going to notice that, and based off of my experience and the testing that I've done, it actually runs and looks like it's going perfectly fine. So I'm not seeing any major issues. Now, I haven't obviously played through the entire game, so I can't confirm that 100% this game is running at full compatibility, but based off of the testing that I have done, which was about an hour to hour and a half of gameplay, I didn't have any issues whatsoever. And every other game that I tested ran perfectly fine. So definitely this thing is well worth its weight in gold. Now, this thing is going to retail for about $170 US, which is definitely on the high end of the price point for these types of cartridges. That being said, if you're a collector of N64 games and you don't want to be taking all of your expensive titles, there are a ton of games. Conker's Bad Fur Day, for example, is like a $90 to $100 game if you're looking for something in really good condition, and that's just the loose price. And there are other games that are substantially more expensive. So this is actually really handy if you have a fairly good collection of N64 titles, but you want to kind of keep them in their own protective boxes or any of those plastic sleeves, and you don't want to have to take them out and put them in the console and be playing around with them. You can grab your backups, you can load up this EverDrive, and you never really have to worry about messing up with your original collection. Now, this is definitely a recommended product from me, especially if you're one of those people that enjoy playing on physical hardware. And if you are one of those people, then I think it goes without saying, you know that there is a difference between playing physical and doing any sort of software emulation. There's just something about it that feels different, and the experience is always better playing any game on the intended console it was released for. But that's pretty much all I've got for you guys in this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Is $170 too expensive for a multi-cart for the N64? I don't think so, but let me know what you think down below. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you didn't like it. Consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you so very much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys again real soon.